Welcome everybody back to the After Dark Show. I'm Don Rogers. I'm really happy to have back with me a friend of mine right here in Canada. It's Dan Armstrong, and I'm happy to have him back again because we're going to try and get into some of the latent symbolism of genetic engineering and hybridization in media and text, and not just in the past and current times too, but I caught an episode with James Bartley and Dan talking about this subject, and it really got this rattling around in my head. And I, of course, have questions, and Dan's the guy with the answers. So thank you so much for coming on. And if you want to give everybody a quick how you doing and where we're going to go tonight.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's really good that you give me the questions that you have from what you saw in the presentation. I can fill in the details in between, but and then just take it from there, you know? I'm really glad that you saw that. I put a lot of work into that actual presentation because I've been studying Pierre Sabac's work for a couple of years, and I really wanted to put it into action. And so I did the symbolic reading on a couple of different things, as you know, and touched on how it related to genetic engineering and so forth, um, based on what Pierre had discovered. And yeah, it was really great. I was very happy that I was able to do it because I really appreciate the work he's done. I think it brings a lot of scholarly seriousness to ufology again, which I think it's in dire need of because it's enough of like a show as it is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Um, for those of us unfamiliar, do you want to get into who Pierre Sabac is and get into the real meat and potatoes of his work so we can get into some of the symbolism we're going to discuss.
Yeah, I think part of that's going to require that just bring out the book. It's like my Bible. I know it's a trite or a cliche kind of thing to say, but for me, I really look at it like it's holy scripture. It's a whole language of things that he's built. But basically, to keep it simple, um, the book I'm referring to mostly, there's another one of his that I have, but it's this one here, Holographic Culture. It sort of goes in and out because of the green screen, but yeah, it's basically his background is an illustrator, so he draws like and paints and everything. Um, but very well academically taught, and he ended up working on a lot of etymology of languages, and he discovered basically a code between ancient languages and in modern ones, which um, it shows that there's been an outside interference with humanity. And he basically demonstrates that through what he creates this framework, which he calls scaphology, which is the study of um, angelic boats and their carriers. So, like we think of angels, we just think of like the typical angel, but he's talking about something different as an angel, and primarily that there's two species of them, right? Two main species. Not that there's only two, but it's a symbolic way to simplify the main factions. Anyhow, it ends up going into understanding religion, particularly monotheistic religions, and um, looking at this whole thing about boats and the metaphor of boats as related to UFOs and the ship of state, the religion of the state religion, which is also like a control structure. So there's a thing that he calls the extraterrestrial control governments. So there's ways that humans are governed through these things like media, right? What we consume, what we believe. So that's a sort of simple way to put it. And then he ends up developing basically a language to talk about all these word correlations and developing his theory, but through a lot of factual based evidence. And there's parts where he says, this is what he believes. So yeah, you've seen a bit of my presentation I did. I looked at a couple of things. I wanted to prove Pierre's work was cogent, like it was realistic, like it would work in a test-based scenario. So I was researching this thing about four-horse drawn chariots called quadriga. Um, and I've became slightly obsessed with the topic. Huh? Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you want me to switch control over so you can share screen if you want as well?
Yeah, at some point, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can try to like prep the stuff first because I don't know. I have my files are really mismanaged. It's terrible. It's a real shame. But let me see what I do have.
And if
Um,
you're watching or listening on audio, come over to the video if I can get it on the air, because we'll talk about that later.
yeah,
Yeah, if you're listening on audio, come watch the video
yeah,
because yeah, some of the stuff you were showing, like that oh, the plate.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll get the plate. Let me bring up the plate and then we can start with that. And then I'll show the thing with the Brandenburg gate, just so I'm not just talking about theory the whole time, which is pretty boring to listen to. Um, okay, so share screen. Yeah, I can click that. Okay, so I was researching through the internet about the quadriga. So quadriga is a four-horse drawn chariot, and I'll explain a bit of the significance later and how it relates to Pierre's work. Basically, um, quadriga, there's a group in Jewish mysticism, like Jewish history, called the Rechabites, Rechabites. And these people were basically part of what Pierre proposes a UFO saucer cult. They were tasked with a secret and carried down this tradition. And this happens in other historical periods. There's the same group, but it reincarnates through Greek, Roman, and later German Rosicrucianism. Anyhow, so I'm looking at this stuff with the Rechabites, and you can see here um, you have 4 lions this time instead of horses for the chariot. So I guess where the language starts to get interesting is I'm going to share a different screen for a second here, just to show the language part for a moment, okay? Give me 1 second. Is it showing, which screen is it showing now? My words?
It's still the plate.
The plate? Okay. So I gotta stop the share and start it again. And then let me go to this one for a second. So good. All right. So I have some notes here that I can share because just to hear the words, you get lost in it really quickly. So I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. So you have the Rechabites, the meaning or the etymological progression. So the word rakab in Arabic means a chariot. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Rakab, to ride. Rakaba, to watch. One who watches, connoting a watcher. Okay, there's a lot into this stuff if you keep going through it. Kab, a coil. Keb, a serpent, figuratively a seraph or seraphim. Kaba, to hide. Clyleptical jana, to conceal, otherwise a jinn. Kabar, inform. Chabar, associate, a familiar spirit. Kabar, okay, and it keeps going on like this, and then kabir, lordship. So you can see the etymology, like the actual progression between the differences in the sounds and how it's also related to other words with different meanings. Okay, so this is like very compound meaning kind of thing. So it's interesting. Rakab, a chariot, and keb, a serpent, is repeated in the English polyglottal pun saucer and saurus, or lizard. Reading between the lines, the angel rides around in a chariot, wheel, or flying saucer. Okay, so this is what I'm lifting from Pierre's work before I'm looking at the plate that we saw earlier. All right, so I'll stop that for a second. I'll go back to the plate. Any questions so far?
Well, I'm just trying to keep the translation straight in my head.
So that's through the Arabic, right? But the Arabic and the Hebrew is very close, and he shows all the things. So you see that it's not just like casual associations. And he also explains in his book why the letters change and how it's a normal part of linguistics, how certain, especially between different languages, how it's like from German to English, a lot of words are the same, right? Like the German word for water is Wasser. You just change the T for an S. Like certain things, it's very small difference because we're partially a Germanic language, right? In English. Anyhow, so I'm trying to get this thing going again.
I do have one quick question.
Yeah.
Um, when you were mentioning boats earlier, uh, is that possibly symbolic for also the arcs? The ships were
Oh,
actually the
absolutely. 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 See, these are very compound signifiers. That's a signifier. It means, so you have a signifier and a signified, a word and its meaning. But in reality, it's just other signifiers. There's really no such thing as meaning. You just relate to other signifiers. Signifiers relate to other ones. Anyway, um, yeah, boats. So this metaphor of the boat, you have to understand, is one of the key metaphors to understanding reality and how it works. This relates to maritime admiralty law. If we sort of touched about that briefly before, which is the entire metaphysical system of financial control that runs our world, that we live by, that we pay our taxes through, and everything else is the lifeblood of the matrix. Um, the that the word religion comes from religare, which is to tie or moor a ship. Okay, so this is what religion is. It's a moored ship. In other words, it's sort of controlled. It's not out at sea. It's not like going out the waves. It's sort of controlled, right? And then you have, of course, the ship of state, right? So ship of state, and it's not just a simple metaphor. Oh, it's just the ship of state. No, it's the ship of state. The whole thing, the word minister, Pierre shows, relates to a rower in the boat. Okay. Like ministers row in the boats, and then there's the captain, the kubtan, and he shows all the relationship between Arabic and all the languages, seeing how this is actually a relationship to understanding the whole concept of ships. If you look at a church has its nave, right? The nave is where it's coming from the navel. The navel is related to the noble. The noble is related to noblesse. Noblesse relates to nocer, to know in Greek. And then nocer is, and it just keeps going and going and going, but you start to see, oh, and it's also related to giga skonin, and that's related to giants. And then you're starting to get into the whole thing about giants. If you just start to look at the way that the languages expand, it's pretty incredible. And that's what Pierre does. Sorry. Get going on this subject. It's hard for me to stop.
No, I absolutely love it. And I'm just sitting here going, and this is why they don't teach entomology in public school, because there'd be a lot of pissed off people if people understood what the language actually meant.
And that they can hide it before, because it's only like through higher learning that you get access to a lot of this stuff, right? Like this isn't meant for like regular people's consumption. But let me just go through my notes for a second here.
Yep.
Um, So when we're looking at this, well, you have these two figures here. This is Cybele, and this is her consort Attis. I want to do some unique things on your show, not just repeat what I've said on Rob's show or James's, okay? Because I think it's always good that if people follow me and they want to see all my interviews, they're not listening to me repeat the same stuff all the time. So this is a different thing I didn't get to talk about as much last time. So I look at Cybele and Attis. Now, the interesting thing, this is her consort. He, of course, there's all these motifs. He's got the shepherd's thing. He's got the pan flute, etc. He's got the figurine cap. You'll notice that the figurine cap is the hat of the French Revolution, as well as the U.S. Senate. These symbols, the more ancient the symbol, the more they want to reuse it because they get power when they demonstrate symbols, right? Anyhow, and this whole plate was discovered, by the way, in Milan in about 1910. It dates to the 4th century, the mid 4th century, so probably around the year 350 AD, even though the style is more of 1st century AD style. It's called the Patera de Parabiago, the Parabiago plate. Normally it means platter directly in Italian, but people are like, it's not a real platter. So then, anyway, it's called a plate. So I'm going to close my messenger. Give me 1 second. It's distracting me. So Cybele and Attis. Cybele is an ancient, this is an amazing figure. If you start to study this figure more deeply, it basically, she goes back to she's the mater materia, the mother of matter. That's what she's known as. And she's famous for having wild animals in a procession. She dates back to like Anatolia, southern Turkey, like 6000 BC. She's one of the most ancient symbols. Anyhow, you have her always with the lions, and this is a whole other thing to get into. But, you know, as I said a bit with James, is the lions are, you know, also related to Orion, and there's that whole steam. Now, symbolically, I just want to quickly drop in the whole thing about these shields that you see around with the soldiers that are dancing around them, called the corybantes. They are the word for, I can't bring it all up. I can't recite it all off my top of my head like Pierre can, but the word for shield is related like this. So there's not just that there's ships, but also understanding all the different symbols for ships, particularly things like UFO. So it's always circular. And this relates, if you go between the different languages, you'll see again, the word for a shield is also related to missile, which is related to a mission, which is a missionary, and all these types of things that are interrelated. But these shields, if you look at it in this dance, that almost look like UFOs surrounding this sort of mystic cosmic event that's occurring. And I can go into the whole thing. There's so much to go into with this stuff, but there's these corybantes. They're followed in the same Roman cult known as the Sali and the Salis, the Salians. So their alias was known as being the Salians. If you play with that as an anagram, it turns out to be aliens, even the word, the name of them in itself. And that goes back with, so you have these Rechabites, and I showed you the Arabic, how the Rechabite was related to it through all of that side. And you get the same thing with the Greeks. And they're all repeating this through history, this knowledge. Anyhow, I think that Cybele and Attis, because Attis is a eunuch, he's being unicized. So the idea about her, and this gets into, we talked about before, the demiurge here, this character in the Aeon is actually the demiurge. I think I talked about that in a previous video briefly, and I showed the other image that it was brought up in the image database when I looked up this symbol. It relates to the same one as the lion demiurge with the snake going around it, right? So
Yeah.
I think in some ways, actually, this scene is related to, I think this this plate in itself is symbolic on so many different levels. There's actually thousands of stories contained in it if you start to unpack it properly. But I think in some ways, perhaps because he can't have a child and she's here and this is the demiurge, I really wonder because Sophia begat the demiurge and she got it without permission of the absolute, which in this case would be represented by the lawful authority of her husband, who's Attis here, right? But she begat a child, which is the demiurge. So I find that whole angle really interesting, that there's that's the part you were talking about with Gnosticism before. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the whole story about, Sophia and the birth of the demiurge or whatever, but that sort of related to that very Gnostic part of the story there.
I actually think we were going to touch on that in this one. Last time when you first showed us about the plate in the last episode, you were saying that you were going to further explain like where the demiurge came from.
Yeah. So the there's a lot to it. Let me see if I can find some of my notes easily. It's a bit, I do things in a sort of scattered order. It's all temporally done, but yeah, it's basically this. I'll make the story as simple as I can. So it's complicated with something because this story has many different versions, right? So the rough outline is Sophia is an aeon, and she decides to create life on her own without the permission of the absolute. So but basically it amounts to she goes and she creates a life form. And then when she does, she regrets it almost instantly because it's this monstrosity called Yaldabaoth. And it's extremely egotistical and um, considers itself God of all matter and that there's nothing else besides it. And so in different versions, Sophia is trying to like rectify the problem and helping humanity out and so on and so forth. But that's the basic strokes of one of the things going on in the painting. But we want to talk more about the genetic engineering aspect.
Yeah.
That goes back to this stuff here. So you'll notice I'll start in this side of the screen. So, oops, sorry. So there's this scene here. I can go to some of my other notes too. So you'll see do you know what this is? Like this corn. This is
Okay.
representing the corn stalk, okay? And you'll notice as well, you got a circular object here, this Ophanum wheel as well. And you'll see that obviously a bit of a sexual scene. Now, corn, okay, to switch my things for a second. Let me just show my notes here. Sorry. So I wanted to show you this part because this relates to it really well. This is from holographic culture. So Dagon, the Palestinian fish deity, a Stitch lineage. The divinity Dagon, Hebrew dag, a fish, is a diptych paronomasia on the Greek word drakon. Okay, so don't worry about what a diptych paronomasia is right now. Okay, as what on the Greek word drakon, and is one of the key deities accredited with the development of the fertility cults throughout the Middle East and the is registered in the Hellenistic, that's Greek lexicon, with the word dagon, corn, an emblem of the fiery star, Sirius, metaphorically a seed, a common motif ascribed exotheologically to dragon, panspermia. So that's interesting in itself, right? So if you just focus on this that I highlighted here, it's a little bit to go through. A diptych paronomasia, I'll explain it now, is basically a diptych, if you know in painting, would be two different paintings that make part of one painting, but they're separated. They're two different paintings that are the same, but separated, okay? They're not joined together. That's a diptych. Paronomasia means it's it's like a word pun. Okay, so it's a word pun between two different languages where they're taking the difference in a sound. We do it in music all the time, right? We get a word to have more than one. We'll change the sound of a word so that it has another meaning, or we'll have a deliberate confusion when we sing certain lyrics so it has multiple meanings, right? Like that's poetry. So to really understand like Angelian, that's what I would call alien languages. To understand Angelian is to understand metaphor. They think in metaphors. Okay, they don't. This whole nonsense like ape language not crap that we have to do by like is ridiculous, right? Like it's so slow, it's very inefficient. I can't stand it. I'm used to like when you communicate telepathically, it's just like instant. It's boom. You can communicate like a lifetime of experiences in like a quarter nanosecond. It's just like boom, done. And this is so slow. It's interesting. But you can see with this, so the Dagon is an ancient deity. Um, it goes right back to Mesopotamia there, right? Like the Middle East. And just to tie it in with something that's relevant in today's world, if you look at the Pope when he wears his mitre hat, that big long one, if you look at it from the side angle, it looks like a big fish head,
Hmm.
mouth open. And that's going back to the worship of Dagon, because that's what they worship, Dagon. It's Babylonian. The inner mystery, remember we're talking about exoteric and esoteric, the public and the private consumption, right? Two different things. Those in the know ser, right? These are the people who are related to the preferred grafted bloodline, right? So I just wanted to do that, and then I'll continue here. So this part, according to Polydorus's translation, the Dagon are semi-daemons personified in Greek mythology as the fish god Triton, a corruption of the word Titan, a giant. A demigod, the Dagon, discloses a class of Titan, a being which is intransposable in the Hebrew mysteries. So I find that very interesting because if we go back to the plate now, imagine I'm seeing this plate after reading this work and I'm seeing all of this like perfectly illustrated and I'm going, this is all on the same thing. Oh my gosh. So look, you have Triton, right? The
Oh,
Titan.
you gotta
This
share
is
your screen.
Neptune. Oh, sorry. Thank you. But if you look, so we go down from the corn. I told you about Dagon, what the Dagon means,
Yeah.
right? And now we look here. Look, we got the Triton, the Titan. This is like Neptune, right? And so this whole plate is very interesting too, because if you look at it, if you take remember the biblical phrase in Genesis, separating the waters above from the waters below. The waters above are the heavens, the waters below are the sea, right? And you can see a nice line right in between the middle of this plate. You have the waters below and the waters above.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is related to sex. These little guys here are called the erotes. I was talking a bit about this on Rob's show last week. Um, Again, you don't you have things like the bundle of rods being the bundle of hay being tied together. This is representative of a stitched bloodline. You'll see this visual pun being replicated. Okay, you have to understand the past. In the past, people were not idiots just because they didn't go to school and read books or have formal education. All right, people were very literate in symbolism. They didn't read letters, but they did understand symbols. They could see any of these characters, they would know the story of it. They weren't uneducated. They were told all the stories. This is part of anyway.
It's I just want to jump in there because Spin's just giggling right behind you. That's really interesting you say that because I had difficulty learning to read when I first went into public school. And later on in life, I figured out it was because when I looked at words on a page, my mind tried to read and understand all of it at once, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was an image instead of a grouping of words.
Right.
I thought I should just understand it.
Yeah.
That's what my
Well,
mind
that's
remembered.
that's that's pretty normal in alien languages. They don't when you read, that's how you read. I remember because I've done it for military consulting and the SSP.
Yeah.
Anyhow, um, you have you're right. So it's just interesting, right? Like we can see these things in ourselves, and and that's why I always tell people like the most interesting story is yourself. But when you can start to get a background and appreciate how deep things go, then you can see that maybe you're boring if you're not making yourself really interesting, but really going within. So you got the bundle of hay. You'll notice the grapes. So the grapes are very symbolic. I can explain that. To me, it's pretty obvious. You got a lamb. Now here you also got a twig, right? It looks like it's and twig. The Greek word for twig, like this kind of bare plant, is clone. Klon. Clone. 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 Clone.
Yeah.
Word right there. Clone. And when they're talking clone, they don't just mean, oh, it meant a twig. It also means because a twig would be something that, like this kind of thing, would be something that you graft onto, right? Like a vine grafts onto another plant. So that's why you have the wine is symbolic because wine is divine, two vines. Die means two. Divine, two vines. Divine wine, right? So you have the grapes, and the grapes are hosted as a parasitic species on top of another plant, the vine that they grow on. Divine wine, and then what do? You consume the wine. In I got the whole thing mixed up, but it's it's relating to the blood. The
Yeah.
wine is relating to the blood. It's relating to hybridization, hybridization, right? Hybridization, uh, parasitic hybridization, and so you have that, and you have the animals being brought together. Anyhow, if you continue, you see from the sea here, you have this woman leaning back. She has a cherub here. I think I discussed a little bit about the cherubs with you guys before, right?
Yeah.
That the cherubs are related to the cherubim. So I've been talking a bit about the seraphim. So we have to understand this difference here. So the cherubim, at least in how Pierre's describing, I know I'm not going to make friends with upset a lot of people who love the cherubim and things like that. But let's just be analytical for a minute instead of be emotionally invested and say, oh, he's saying something horrible. But so the cherubim are the one species, they're the more human looking of the angels. Okay, so basically the basic lowdown on the cherubim, the story is they're basically probably coming from like Pleiades, and they're more anthropomorphic, maybe Nordics, right? They're more human looking. And then you have the seraphim, which look more like a reptile or a viper. Okay, that's and more of that, like the dragon side. Okay, so um, so the cherubim is represented as small to try to, not because they're small, but in fact because they're regular human size, and they're trying to talk about the exaggeration that the seraphim are taller, or the dominating species. Okay, because there basically ends up being a fight between them. They end up having a truce. They end up creating this hybrid human, the Adam. And take some DNA from an Earth hominid. They take some DNA from themselves. They make humans sexually compatible with their own species, which is very interesting. So humans are sexually compatible with the seraphim and the cherubim. Now, that doesn't mean that just physically, but possibly also more importantly on a spiritual level, that they would be able to, maybe this means be able to be hosted by those species with their physical body, right? I think there's a lot more that goes into it. We're not necessarily just saying it. Yeah. So in any case, you have this woman leaning back. If you look at her arm, you see that there's a snake starting from the bottom. It goes up, it intertwines with her arm. In fact, it was suggesting basically that her arm and her are part of the same snake, right? If you're looking at this casually. Cornucopia is also going in between them. The cornucopia here, of course, representing the stitched bloodlines, the different genetic elements being put together in the same strands, with the snake going around it, signifying, the binding. Again, you have the grapes being eaten by the snake, and the angel, the cherub, is leaning down on the grapes at the same time, showing the conjoining of the cherub, the seraphim and cherubim elements.
That's wild.
Isn't that crazy? And of course, there's this whole thing. This is about Venus and Sirius as well. That's what this signifies. And I could get
Yeah.
into the specifics on more of it, but that's, a basic way to see that there's this stuff with these languages. And when I say, even just cherubim, that I'm just not using a word, I'm using specific ancient words, right? So these aren't just like modern words people have invented to try to talk. Like we say silly things like Nordics or whatever. Like obviously this isn't what they're called. um, and the same. So I like working with it at a technical level. So I'll just stop there because that's a lot to take in itself. Any questions, or did you saw this stuff before? You see this stuff here? Any
Yeah.
feedback? Mm-hmm.
When you were explaining the separation of the waters, how the ones are above and ones are below, I noticed, and you had mentioned this on James's show as well, is the placement of the lizard and the mantis or grasshopper are actually just above or among what would be the humans, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that sort of shows the entanglement of the humans and reptilians and mantis.
Oh yeah. And I that's what I'm saying. It's not just the seraphim and cherubim. We're talking about a lot of things. If you look at this part here with the aeon, you can't see it very well. It isn't etched, but basically these are zodiac signs in this loop that the aeon is standing in. And the zodiac signs, of course, zodiac, they're animals, they're different species, right? So we have all the creatures of the zodiac is representational too of many different types of species that may be anthropomorphic in different ways, but have the attributes of other species.
No, that's awesome.
So,
Uh,
like if you're on Rick and Morty, we don't want to have to learn snake math, right? That'll be a lot of work.
I love reference. Yeah.
I love that. I love how the snakes have their whole like society. Like that made me laugh so hard because It, anyway.
I could do an entire episode of the symbolism of Rick and Morty season
Yes,
by
do
season
that, please, please.
because that cartoon is insane. And I think I'm going to kind of squirrel here for a second. I think that cartoon is so abrasive intentionally because there's so much hidden within it. Like I've watched it and like there's ones where he's going to Valhalla and everything else in the newer seasons, and like he's messing with the astral and the afterlife. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like it's just this abrasive, rude, drunk cartoon. So of course nobody takes it seriously,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But it's insane, and like it's just so in your face.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's the whole point. Like I was saying with the Gnosticism, it's like see that it's around you everywhere. This is the whole point about bringing this thing about that plate. Okay, so that plate goes back, but the important thing is that's well before YouTube, you know.
Yeah.
It's well before the printed Bible. Um, so it has some pretty interesting authority as an object without the bias, right? We can see like when you start to really dig in through the symbols of everything on that, like they give obviously conventional explanations for a lot of it. Oh, this just means the seasons and this is the sun setting and la la la. Like just this mundane, boring explanation, totally for the public consumption. It's safe enough to put on an airplane movie, you know, boring crap. As opposed to what it's talking about, which you see the whole thing is replete with sexuality, re like everywhere in it. You can see that in that plate. And then I show like the whole thing with the Brandenburg Gate, where you have the quadriga there and the bas relief underneath it, showing the whole scene again of the seraphim and cherubim angels and how they've been joined together, right? Into and at the primarily at the expense of the cherubim that are more of their, you know, beast of burden. So I get into the symbolism between the mammalian aspect versus the reptile snake aspect and contrasting those two things. Because there's a consistency. It's always a horse. Many, like very few instances, you actually have the snakes as the part of the chariot, although that is one of the valid ones. It's horses, lions you saw, and horses, lions, and humans. Yeah, cherubs. So
Yeah.
That's to me really profound, and I show it, you know, through that whole bottom diptych too, and then how they even show like the one person still has like a human body, like a human torso, but like a snake legs. I don't know if you saw that in the part two of it, right? But in the part two of it, I'll have to give you part two to watch. I talk, and you can see actually the one person still has a snake legs and everything. And that's right there in Berlin. It's like one of the wonders of the modern world, right? 7 wonders of the modern world. It's the Brandenburg Gate, and here it is, right in your face, public disclosure. For the eyes, those with the eyes to see, right?
That's that's a very valid point because I think that was something that was done because you really didn't have the books or the ways to convey some of the things that you needed to. So you had to put multiple meanings into your art and your literature, or however you could convey that message. And you would put like 20 or 30 different stories and explanations into one thing because you could only make that one piece because the materials just weren't there. And you just couldn't afford to make like a dozen different plates for a dozen different stories.
Yeah, well, I think it's not like a lot of people get into, oh, does that mean they know that? No, you know, that's the whole thing with secret societies and that too. People get commissioned to do different things. They're not told. They're just like, you, I want the painting to look like this. I want this statue to look like this. It doesn't mean even the person who's paying for it even knows what they want. The point is that somehow there's this expression of this reality is what when you start to understand these master signifiers of different metaphorical concepts and how these metaphors are related to in different languages, and that that's part of our psyche is actually built out of light, like our psyche is built out of language. And when you see that there's literally being cleavage sites where they're changing, making, editing our consciousness, that's huge implications, right? Because the most valuable real estate is what's in between your temples here, right? So yeah, any questions from that though? You saw a lot. Yeah, I think I try to make it as simple to follow as possible, but what do you think?
I actually had one written here.
Yeah.
Uh, what is your take on the programmed evolutionary changes in DNA? Like, do you think that that's been done to us throughout time?
Yeah,
Like,
probably. Well, I think that, well, look at it. I mean, even probably a lot of the abduction phenomena is related to editing people, you know.
yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, I guess my question is,
I
like,
don't
do
think
you
they're
think,
just running tests, you know. I don't like, oh, look, this one's got this kind of heart rate, or, you know, he's low on magnesium. Like, obviously, you know,
yeah,
there's more going on.
well, and what I was getting at is like, if we were a compilation of this and that and bred down to what we are now, do you think there's evolutionary changes pre-programmed into humanity still at
Mm.
this point? Like, are we going to continue to change? Do you think, like, do we still have place? A lot of people talk about the crystal body and that phenomenon
Mm.
and the light body. Like, do you think we are actually going to physically change?
Well, I don't think it's so much if we change. I mean, we're already immortal beings, those of us that aren't just NPCs at least. So, and you know, I'd like to think as a lot of people. So it doesn't matter because it's all a state of it. It's all a state of mind anyway. Um, I think the avatar can change, sure. Maybe the avatar will be upgraded. Maybe limitations will be taken off the avatar that allow the avatar to do greater things, like more easily express things telepathically and so on and so forth, and all these other great things beyond the senses that we're limited by at the moment. You know, like how much like we're even just like you don't even have to, you can just create the right environment to control people because it's epigenetic, right? Like that's why you control how cities work and how economies work, is because you're epigenetically controlling people. By whatever environment you're in is going to change your body expression, right? So having to live in the modern world changes the way that you end up being, and that changes your physical vessel. So imagine what happens if we can be more of the beings that we used to be. I don't think it's about we evolve forward. I think we're evolve backward. If it makes any sense. I don't think anything towards this weird dystopian future is like the way we go. I think we totally go back to the past. Like, look at the buildings they're making in Europe a few hundred years ago. They're gorgeous. We can't even make anything that beautiful anymore. So, you know, I think we actually go back and you know, I think that we've been also sold a bill of goods. We don't know what parts of history are right, how much of it's being rewritten, anything to do with that stuff, right? Like we honestly don't know. Um, but I think, like, what do you think? Do you think, well, I don't see, like, Pierre speculates that it will go into what he calls homo noeticus, like a mind. Um, but where he says that we have the potential to understand the concepts and do the exact same things that these controllers have held over us for all this time, this knowledge, because they are flesh and blood beings on a certain level. They also know how to hang out and live in a mortal astral realm and suspend their body probably through meditation or something while they have consciousness in the astral realm for thousands of years and then go back into their body whenever they feel like it, and so on and so forth. They've manipulated, they've mastered what Pierre calls the particle wave paradox. They can control time and space. They know through their, like, and there's many accounts of people talking about reptilians with watches and things like this, where they can just, it's like Rick and Morty. They're got their little portal gun. They can go right away. That what little reptilians James talks about with interviews where people have had things with little reptilian kids and they got a little magic wand. They can just like do different shit with it, right? It's just really advanced tech. So the interesting part of this is we're talking about, these are very interesting species. They're ancient, they have very advanced tech, but in some ways it's like Star Wars still. It's just because their they have all this tech means that it's all a tech lifestyle. Anyway, I guess what he's trying to say is we're on the verge, possibly as a species, where we can learn to do the same thing. We can maybe learn how to control the wave particle duality, and through a type of evolution in our consciousness. And this evolution in our consciousness will allow us to connect. And as we actually end up being one, we'll become like this new organism. And that will be able to like evolve and do it. I don't think we'll just be like, oh, look, this person's doing it, that person's not. And oh, when are you going to be evolving? Like, I think it'll probably be, from what I understand about major evolutionary changes, it's what they call the singularity. It will be an event that will converge. And then once all these points come together, it's like it goes from one state into a completely different state and it changes. That's
I think I think you're right, and I think as well, like what you were saying about society, I think that is the sociological or societal construct is actually one of the key components to keeping us out of our metaphysical abilities and the ascension process itself. Because if we are so, well, not me and you, but most of society is so complacent and compliant with everything they're being told to do and what to think, and like all of these abilities, like they're just becoming less and less. And it really
they're
is.
becoming helpless. People act like everybody acts like Mr. Burns nowadays, waiting for Smithers to do something for them. They're just helpless. I can't get over it when I see
Yeah,
people in public. Like they really don't want to do anything for themselves. They don't want to think. They don't want to do get an item off a shelf. Nothing. They just want people to literally spoon feed them. It's just shocking to see.
yeah.
Shocking. Yeah.
And I think that's part of what the delay is because there's so many that are that complacent that they're not getting the spiritual evolution. I
Yeah.
don't.
Well, there's
Yeah,
even a lot of people that are truthers, right? But they don't do the spiritual side. And they're just looking at it from like, they're just red pilling themselves. So they're
yeah,
just, or black pilling themselves, um, instead of, they just, and they know everything about all these different, evil concoctions of the New World Order, but they still haven't gone within. They still aren't addressing their shadow. Their pathology and hatred of the New World Order is largely so that they don't have to pay attention to their shadow. Um, So that needs to happen, right? It's not just there's the normies, because there's a lot of people who think that consider themselves truthers, but they don't do the spiritual work. And because they're not doing this, and the people who think they're doing the spiritual work aren't doing the spiritual work. I hate to say it, right? Like they're not, because you should be in a lot of pain. I've cried a lot and had a lot of heartache, and then a lot more of it. But it obviously it gets better, but that's where the real manifestation of the evils of the world is happening right now, is because people have their own unresolved traumas. That's it. You can complain and say it's the economy, you can say it's this, you can say it's that, but if you're not right within yourself, it doesn't matter what the exterior world has going on. And that's the danger about people who get into these subjects. It's so easy to distract you. You could waste years alone just reading different Gnostic beliefs. But you have to ask yourself, how much do I need to know? And how much do I just want to distract myself with it too? Like, I like to go deep on this stuff. Like, it's cool. I have no problem with anybody going really deep on a subject. I think it's an awesome thing to do. But get good at something. Don't try to know it all. You can't know it all anyway. It's actually impossible. So just get to know something really, really good, and maybe be an expert in your own area that you really like or something. And I think that's what people should do more, instead of worrying about all this other stuff, because it's infinite. It's always going to be going on. And people don't even understand how much energy they give by constantly paying attention to it. There's all these people, these prepper types and everything. And I'm just like, oh, it's so annoying listening to them, right? Buy silver, you got to do this, you got to do that. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it's like, oh, I don't want to live in that kind of world. I want to think of the world to come, the one that I even want to try to build within this lifetime. That's what excites me. I want to bring heaven on earth. I think that's our job, is to bring heaven on earth. We need to create beautiful buildings. We need to have beautiful communities, beautiful arts, beautiful celebration of life, and not look like we're just some nasty slave consumer society. The galactic board of planets, like, let's not make earth look like some kind of North American billboard highway chain store nightmare of a planet. Like, that's an embarrassing version of our planet to have. I think we need to get to serious work on de-uglifying our cities. Really, we gotta get rid of this. There's a whole dependency on like the way people live with their cars and the consumer model and wasted land, and oh, it's ugly.
Yeah.
It's 1950s Frankenstein gone wrong, and it's replicating itself all around the world. That's the worst part about it at this point. Everybody wants to have shopping malls as a sign of development, and you know, it's horrible.
It it's literally, and I hate to keep going back to a cartoon, but it's voluntary slavery, except like Rick and Morty says, it's slavery with extra steps. I'll
Mm.
work for you and you work for me and I'll pay for my house and you do this. We were not That's the trap of all. Sorry, I know we're off topic
No,
here, but
no, it isn't. It's all relevant. This is why I say this, because I want people to realize like it's all part of the same system, right? When I'm talking about Seraphim, Cherub, and all this, I'm talking about extraterrestrial controlled governments. The reason why all this is shitty is not just because humans are vastly incompetent and can't manage to do things correctly. It takes a lot of work to make a world that's this incompetent. It takes a lot of work to create a world with this much debt, considering its natural abundance. It takes a lot of work for an education system to keep people this stupid. It takes billions and trillions of dollars to keep everybody suppressed. That's what we have to understand at the same time. So we're talking about lifting these systems. We're actually talking about lifting ourselves from the bondage of this hybridized government system, this secret parallel society that's been playing us the whole time.
yeah,
in varying degrees. I think there's obviously big pockets of human freedom and everything else, but obviously the point what we're at now, we're talking about a very, you know, malign
Well,
version of it.
Spinja actually handed me a note and she says, and if you know something is off about the system will send you in circles via things like family court, traffic court, CRA, CAS, all of these things.
Right. They're institutions that they control. Right. So, but it's not like a lot of people think, oh, they get really, scared when you start to talk big boy, like you talk like adults, but you're not talking about sports or some trite nonsense. Then where was I going with it? My point is that I'm sorry, I lost my point, but you have to go ahead.
Well, it happens. I happen. It happens to me like once an episode. So
Yeah.
at least, yeah, it's been just like at least. Um, did you have other material that you wanted to share as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I got tons of stuff. I don't like to bore people with my things either.
Not boring.
Yeah, I showed the thing with the demiurge before. I think I showed some of those other ones. Yeah, okay, so let me do a little slideshow thing here for you, okay? Keep it interesting. All right, so I'm going to go back. So there's the plate we were talking about. And you're seeing that, okay? It's showing you the plate. You're muted, Don.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so here's the demiurge I was talking about. So the Aeon, this, and you can see again, you can't see it too well, but you'll see that there's the zodiacal creatures on his body. Remember I was talking about the zodiac and the ring had the zodiac sign. So you'll see that the symbols replicate but in a different way. It's a different thing, but it's saying the same story, right? On a different level. And that's where you have the lion head with the snake on top. And of course the wings. So seraphim, cherubim, dialectic, of course, standing on the world, like I showed before too. This is the Aeon again. You'll notice that the Aeon again has the zodiacal signs. This is in another thing, and it's not even based off of the Patera. These, what I want to show is that these aren't just random images. These are carefully crafted images that have different times and meanings along with each other. You'll see, so there's the Aeon, and you'll notice again the same woman from before who is leaning back with the snake in her, weaving through her arm, and the erotes around her, those same children as before.
That's crazy.
And you can see the same thing again. Here's Cybele, the woman that you saw sitting in the chariot before. This is
Yeah.
Attis this time. This is the Aeon, or the Demiurge. You can see the very strong Lucifer overtones with this one. Holding a globe with the snake going around it. Again, the snake representing knowledge and everything too. You see the Roman centurion here. Again, with the shield that's from similar to like a UFO here. This is what it's trying to connote in the construction. You'll see the laurel wreaths are often used as well as a symbol of uniting of the different bloodlines and the peace between the seraphim and cherubim. And of course, here you have on there the wolf of feeding Romulus and Remus for the founding of Rome. Right, the brothers, the founding of Rome. The quiver of arrows, all of these things have symbolic meanings, not the least of which this guy's giant erection.
You have to have that.
Got it. Not a power symbol without a big penis. Yeah, and the eagles and that, of course, birds of prey. So you got that one. Again, there's the demiurge again. Older version again, the demiurge, same thing. You see, this isn't, you see the accuracy in how symbols can replicate versus how words morph and get corrupted over time, right? There's something in language, in linguistics called phonemic drift, right? Words change. We actually change the way we speak every few decades, that where we're actually slipping and changing, cutting consonants, cutting vowels out of words, shortening them. Certain words go out of use, other ones go in place, all different types of things. Languages always evolve. Every 100 years, basically, a language drastically evolves compared to where it was the 100 years before. Anyhow, when you see the symbols stay consistent. This is a nice one in Europe. You see, this is with cherubs again on the upper deck of a palace. And again, you have them. And this is why, I mean, it's amazing going to Europe. It's like, it's literally like historical Disneyland. It's amazing. Like everywhere you go, it's like a museum. They're so great about all their historical preservation and restoration. And there's people who have to have these skills to be able to rebuild these things that have been destroyed in the past through war. So they have a whole economy that's investing in people continuing to pass down these craft skills, which is very critical, right? Anyhow, you notice that they're looking down on everyone. And that's a theme I get into later, where I'm interested in looking at this phenomena of putting the saints and angels and everything above the people as part of being the watchers. You know, it's all symbolic.
Makes sense.
These are the watchers. Yeah, it's amazing. Like you really have to go to Europe sometime. I mean, farms are great and everything, but trust me, you'll love this stuff. It's awesome. Imagine having a great cup of coffee or whatever and walking around seeing this stuff. It's incredible. Oh, this is the Brandenburg Gate Quadriga. These are different computer images I have of it. Anyhow,
What what really sparked you to first get involved in this? Like, what was the trigger moment that when you just were, I have to know all of this. What is this? Because I've had my moments where I've just deep dove things. What was the tipping point for you on
yeah,
this?
okay, let me find my note in my book and you'll see because I was just so, I mean, I knew a lot of it, okay, but it I was studying it for a long time. But when I hit the stuff on the quadriga with the Rechabites, that's when it really clicked. Because I had an earlier thing I was telling you before about my historical model I was trying to develop about the horse and the rider and the blinders on the horse. So I already had that as a basic framework I knew that had to be developed. Um, but when it came to like Pierre stuff and I read some of it, I realized not only was it as incredible as it was, it I could connect it through this thing of the Rechabites, this quadriga, this 4-horse chariot. It goes into all these other subjects he goes into. I was looking at like how it's on coins. It was put on a lot of Roman coins, quadrigas. This was like, of course, the chariot racing and everything in ancient Rome and Byzantium. And so there's a whole relationship between this whole thing also of the equities. So the horse is of the equine family, right? So, and equus means work. Equity is the work that you've put into something, right? The investment that you've put into something. So there's this relationship again too between, like I said before, the mammalian aspect and this milking to get the cream. what they call the prophets, the cream. This is all deeply metaphorical about this parasitic relationship these beings have with our species, right? There's almost a very deep, dark humor behind it when you really start to see the metaphors, because to an advanced intelligence that would have awareness of these things, they would be able to read through all the symbols with no problem. And then laugh to themselves like, oh, these fucking idiots, they can't even see it's right in the front of their face. Right?
And
Mhm.
that's what you were explaining. Of course, I can't remember that big long word, but it was the dual.
Diptych
The dual.
paranomasia. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that actually makes sense. Like it's literally just a mockery side by side, and it's yeah,
Yeah, it's right there, and it's like, and then people always pass this off like one by one, like, oh, isn't that interesting? What a coincidence! Like it's just some kind of little footnote of curiosity. But when you start to tabulate all these things, like now we have etymology dictionaries online. You can just you can do all this research yourself. That's how Pierre did this. His background isn't linguistics. He taught him all this. He has like all these dictionaries. He has probably like dozens and dozens of all these different ones and biblical ones and everything like this. But I read this part. Listen to this. Far-reaching, the epithet Rechabites is from the Hebrew word rakab, a large chariot with 4 horses, a variant on the Arabic noun rakab, a chariot. Analogical, rakab parallels the Arabic eponym rakib, a guardian, watcher, observer, a name that connotes the root rakia, to grow, go up or ascend. Definitions climactical of the Elohim, the lofty ones. So there's this, when I saw that, I read that, I was just like, oh my God, I need to work on this horse metaphor. And I love things like classical statues. You know, Pierre would talk about it as it's a classified tradition because it's based on class. And which word is it related to? Clace. I want to say clace means like key, which means a secret. You know, things like this, like class, place, all these things are related to the fact that there's this secret, that there's parallel bloodlines, there's a, of course, a managerial class. That's what your hybrids would be, your royals. Okay, so the royals are the hybrids. They're the planetary managers, right? They're the intermediaries with the extraterrestrial governments, right? And this is related to, like, I could show it through the Thai symbolism. I could show you all the symbolism related to Thailand. It's all naval, and it's got these, you know, like the nine parasol umbrella, like a parasol, like it's 9 of them together, and it looks like you you can see that it's been international, right? Um, Different expressions of the same stories. Sure, okay, there are Indo-European roots, there's this, there's that, but um, it ties together the mythology in a whole new way that allows you, it's sort of like open source mythology with what you get into with Pierre. When you get the terminology under control, you can start to go explore things on your own. And that's what I wanted to do by looking at those examples, right? Is show like, yeah, it's not just a theory, like conjecture, it's actually a science of um, of a linguistic science. And but it's not just working with linguistics, it's working with visual symbolism as well. So understanding the relationship between visual symbolism and linguistics, and how that there were these word plays, these deliberate homonyms and everything else, just like we have in poetry, to be able to express advanced concepts so that you could have multiple meanings for different audiences and tell different ones different interpretations of the story, which is exactly what you have in masonry, right?
yeah.
So first degree, they tell you one story. Second degree, they tell you a different story of the same elements. Third degree, they're telling you a different story, and they keep doing that over and over and over again, right? So they're explaining the same symbols, or they might introduce a symbol or two, but then it's changing. And that's, like I said, the university system. You have your 3 degrees of masonry too, right? You have your bachelor, master, doctor, first, second, third degree, right? As is evidenced by the the clothing that you wear upon convocation, which is what they call the graduation at university, right? Where people have big Masonic V's. Right? Big Masonic V's, wearing their black robes, which is the cult of Saturn, with their mortar boards, which is literally a mortar board, which is related directly to Masonry. And it also is the black cube of Saturn, which is square dominating your natural circular head or elliptical head. It's squaring the circle, the old problem of squaring the circle.
That
Symbols, and people go through these rituals all the time. Oh, it's just a tradition. No, it's not just a tradition.
yeah,
I'm very suspicious. The biggest word you should always be suspicious of in the English language is the word just. Anytime somebody says just, they're minimizing something that's quite the opposite.
that makes a lot of sense.
I'm always
Yeah.
suspicious of the word just. Yeah, so you like these symbols have a very relevant meaning. I'm interested in looking at these classical things because they're related to a classified tradition. Um, and it's beautiful. It's great. It's great artwork, right? Like it's really nice to be able to explore these things. But you were saying, and this is an interesting time with what you were saying with like the sci-fi and everything else we have with pop culture. So Pierre would say this is exactly the way they've done things. Is there's always been a level of light disclosure, but it's encoded through the myths and legends and stories of the people, right? And we see that in religion. The Bible, when we really start studying it now, if you look at like Mauro Buglino and Paul Wallace, I mean, you look them up and you can see it's basic. They're telling you, yeah, yep, they're actual spaceships. Yes, the Elohim it wasn't one guy, it was a group of aliens. Whoa, look how it's used in the Bible here. Oh, there's a different Elohim here. So there's not one. They look like they're sort of regional controllers over these different areas in the Middle East. They actually don't look anything like these supernatural deities that we thinking that they are like, no. There's something else going on here, right? So it's actually being disclosed all the time, but it's encoded. So without the correct keys to decipher it, you're just reading it on one level, just like people watching a Marvel. Some people watching a Marvel movie are just, watching it at face value, and that's fine. But people who can see the different symbolisms or aware of different ideas and concepts could be like, whoa, look at this level of disclosure going on here. And that's true when we start to understand the symbolism for lots of things, right? Like buildings and shapes and colors and all these things, and how they're always informing your subconscious mind. And that's part of the epigenetics I'm talking about. The subconscious mind is the thing that is in charge of your like manifestation, right? That's why they're not trying to speak to your conscious mind. They're always trying to speak to the subconscious mind. Subconscious mind is the mind of desire. So, and it bypasses, it's much faster. It has much greater computing capacity, right? It works on a completely different level. So most of these things we're impressed with are on our subconscious mind. And that's what also keeps us within the prison. And that's what the
Something
Gnostics are trying to get out of, right? They're trying to get out of the prison reality.
something Spinge has brought up before that actually relates to this is how they've got generations of people being creator beings on autopilot,
Yeah.
right? You exactly what you're saying, like it's all impression, like
Think
impression.
of it. Think of the level of like cynicism something has to have for life to take like, holy crap. Look, mommy, I caught a god.
Yeah.
Let's
Well,
trick
yeah,
it. Let's trick it into make it. Let's turn it into a flea circus.
exactly. I I reference that quite often is the
Yeah.
whole flea focus thing where
So
they've
it's
caught us.
pretty scary, right? Like I see it all the time. I'm amazed at seeing how much people's like we all have health issues. I'm not belittling people who go through health issues at all. But one thing that shocks me is people's attitude towards their health and their health issues. Um, so many people give away all their power, and it's evident right there. Um, so many people want to invest themselves in the ridiculousness of politics and voting. Like I'm not saying don't vote or whatever, but they'll put so much energy into like reading every article about this stuff and everything. It's just like it doesn't matter. You really, really, really. That's not even the last place you're going to find truth is in that area. Um, so it's like Philip K. Dick calls it the Black Iron Prison. I don't know if you've heard of that term before,
No,
but I like it. Black Iron Prison, the prison that people can't see, right? And breaking the Black Iron Prison. He looks at Rome as typification of the Black Iron Prison. That's why he believed that we're still in 70 AD. It was still the Roman Empire. In some ways, it's true because we can't see that it's still very much the Roman Empire. It's this empire based on property and slave class and all this nonsense, right? Big government bureaucracy, having all these idle people, etc. I mean, and it's to understand too that that's what these ETs have wanted. Like they founded Rome, they founded these civilizations. At times, it's not to say humans don't have a creative capacity, but these were managed projects. These people like Alexander the Great, but he's clearly a hybrid, right? And it's taking over the known world at the time. There's a really weird history that we need to go back and really look over our history again and understand that there's probably a lot more under the hood than what we're talking about. Like Pear would suggest things like, the whole story about like Helen of Troy and the whole what is it with the Trojan horse, right? The Odyssey and all of this is actually a story about again genetic engineering, bringing this horse into do it and then inseminate it, change things over. So these stories really are trying to tell us something. I feel like there's this story is screaming to get out. It's like a ghost that wants its story to be known. It's disturbing everyone in the home until you can pay attention, find out what the hell is going on, and maybe get to know the story about why this ghost is here. And it's like this ghost of our past um, that's screaming to get let out. And we're going to keep seeing it. And you'll see the same basic stories. They just repeat and repeat and repeat. And they go the same story from the past and it's the same story of trauma. Like even this one, like I can't just say like that thing is talking about a historical period, a moment that occurred. It's talking about a repeating trauma that occurred over and over and over again in many, 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 many ways. But just like I was talking about that singularity earlier, coming together into moving into the next phase, I felt like that Patera is like it was a singularity too, though. I feel like there was a moment where all these things converged together and it went from one reality, boom, into a new one. And I feel like that it's almost like photograph of that moment is the way I look at it, as if it's like a radio signal or something that has a distinctive signature. I feel like that was an actual singularity, a crossing of a threshold. We don't know what we were before. Maybe we were much different, and a lot of things have been tamped down. We know also through the stuff like Pierre talks about, like this isn't, we're not the first model. There was at least, there was one that was before, and that's, you even see that like in the Greek myths, like the gods create a more perfect human being, and then they destroy it because they're jealous and they can't control it, and then they recreate human beings. Okay, like you have to go back through these myths and read them in a new way. You need to go back through the the Hindu scriptures, all these things. They're telling you these things, but it's encoded, and it is part of a very secret class that was privy to that true knowledge and true meaning, and that's where you get your secret societies and everything else, right?
Wow. This has been amazing, Dan, and I can't believe we've gone like
Yeah, I know
probably
it's gonna
90
be long.
minutes already.
Yeah, I
What's
think
that?
it's about 90 minutes, so I should leave you there.
Yeah, we'll do it again next month because I love having you on, and hopefully by then I'll figure out why I couldn't go live. I'm thinking I probably got spanked for something I said. Um,
Yeah,
but
but you can upload this right away and then people can see it, and
yeah. Uh, so before we do take off, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, they can do that where?
I'm just telling nowadays for people, it's sort of, I hate having too many people on my friends list, but I'm just telling people to go on Facebook. I still like, I really started building the website last week. It was such a pain in the butt. So hopefully that'll be done soon. It'll be higher-octaves.online for when it is ready. But until now, just Dan Armstrong on Facebook. And if you see Don on there, I'm a friend and with Chris Matthew and all them too. So just probably message me that way. I do the TQH stuff. I also like to just talk with other real experiencers, not just paranormal, but people need help with my lab stuff or SSP or whatever. Just I'm there too. I'm a person, I have a real life, so please be
Yeah.
understanding if I don't have a lot to give, but I do try to get back to people and talk to them if I can. So thank you.
All right. And for everybody that's watching and listening, thank you for watching and listening. And if you can't go outside, do what Dan did and read some books because this shit is fascinating.
Yeah, so
And
yeah, read Holographic Culture. If I can get everybody, just give a plug for Pierre there. I know it's not showing up well, but you'll see there Pierre Sabak. Go to pierresabakbooks.com. You can order it straight from him. You get a signed copy from him, and he even writes a nice little note in there for you. And I think it's really awesome. You can get that in the Murder of Reality because they charge you the same shipping anyway, and you got enough reading material to last you a good while.
I'll grab that link from you and put it in the description of this.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody, and I'll have to get you to cut it off, Dan, because I switched control over
All
to
right,
you. So
sure.
bye, everybody.
All right. Bye.